The rain had been falling since late afternoon, the kind that softened the edges of the world and made everything feel quieter than it should. By the time I arrived at his house, the street lights glowed like halos in the mist, and my shoes were damp with the smell of wet concrete. I told myself it was just another visit. Routine, familiar, safe. I had known Daniel for nearly a year. We weren't friends in the way people usually mean it, but we weren't strangers either. He was older, calmer, the kind of man who carried silence comfortably. I, on the other hand, filled every quiet moment with thoughts I never said out loud. Tonight, like many nights before, I was there to help him relax. A massage, nothing more. At least, that's what I kept repeating in my head. Inside, the house was warm and dim. A single lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, casting long shadows across the walls. The curtains were half drawn, and somewhere deeper in the house, a clock ticked steadily, louder than it should have been. Daniel greeted me with a tired smile, his shoulders slumped, his eyes heavier than usual. "Long day," he said. I nodded, though he hadn't asked about mine. He went to shower while I set things up, moving through the space like I belonged there, even though a part of me never fully did. I placed the oil bottle on the table, noticing my hands tremble just slightly. I told myself it was the weather, or the caffeine, anything but the truth. When he came back, wrapped in a towel, the air seemed to change. Not dramatically, just enough to make me aware of my own breathing. He lay down on the massage table without a word, face turned away from me. His back rose and fell slowly, evenly. Calm, trusting. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. This is normal, I reminded myself. You've done this before. As I began, the room filled with the faint scent of eucalyptus. My movements were careful, professional. I focused on technique, pressure, rhythm, anything to keep my thoughts from drifting. Still, I couldn't ignore the strange quiet between us, heavier than usual, as if something unspoken had already entered the room ahead of me. Halfway through, a sound broke the silence. Not loud, just the subtle shift of fabric. The towel moved slightly, and my heart reacted before my mind did. I paused, then continued, pretending I hadn't noticed. But I had. My thoughts spiraled despite my efforts. Why does this feel different tonight? Why does it feel like I'm standing at the edge of something I can't name? The rules I'd carefully built in my head suddenly felt thin, fragile. Then Daniel spoke, his voice low, almost hesitant. Do you ever feel like some lines are only there because we're afraid to cross them? My hands stilled. The question hung in the air, heavier than the rain outside. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet fear mixed with something dangerously close to curiosity. And as the ticking clock grew louder, I wondered, had the line already started to disappear, or was I just imagining it? The question lingered long after Daniel fell silent. I didn't answer right away, not because I lacked words, but because every possible response felt like a confession. Instead, I adjusted my stance and let my hands move again, slower this time, as if caution alone could keep the moment from tipping into something else. Outside, the rain intensified. It drummed against the roof in uneven patterns, sometimes fading, sometimes rushing back with sudden force. The house seemed to breathe with it, old wood settling, pipes clicking softly. Ordinary sounds, yet each one felt amplified, like the world was leaning in to listen. Daniel exhaled deeply. I noticed how his shoulders dropped, how his neck relaxed beneath my thumbs. I focused on the mechanics of my work, counting the motions in my head, but my thoughts kept circling back to his question. Lines, I repeated silently. Fear, maybe, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. Some lines exist for a reason. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he shifted slightly, the table creaking beneath him. The towel slipped just enough for me to notice, and I forced my gaze to stay where it belonged. Still, awareness crept in uninvited, the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of his breathing, the closeness that felt more intimate than touch alone. You sound like you don't believe that, he said. I swallowed. I believe in consequences. That earned a low chuckle. Not mocking. Thoughtful. Consequences can be interesting, he murmured. The word interesting settled somewhere uncomfortably deep. I felt it in my chest, in the pause before my next breath. I had always admired how easily he spoke, how he seemed unafraid of silence or implication. Being around him felt like standing near a slow-moving current, calm on the surface, powerful underneath. As I worked, my mind wandered back to how this arrangement had started. A mutual acquaintance, a casual suggestion, Daniel's offhand comment about chronic tension, and my quiet admission that I knew how to help. It had all felt harmless then. Practical. Controlled. Now, control felt like a fragile illusion. The lamp flickered once, briefly dimming the room before returning to its steady glow. My heart jumped anyway. Daniel noticed. Storms messing with the power, he said, though his tone suggested he was aware of more than just the weather. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It's getting worse out there. Yeah, he replied. Feels like one of those nights where things don't quite stay the same. I paused again, just for a second. Is he talking about the storm, or us? The thought made my stomach tighten. I shifted my focus, moving to his shoulders, applying firmer pressure. He sighed, a sound so soft it felt almost private. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing closer as if trying to contain what was building between us. Do you ever think about leaving? He asked suddenly. The question surprised me. Leaving? What? This, he said. The routine, the expectations, the version of yourself you keep showing people. My hands slowed. Images flashed through my mind. My own apartment, the carefully curated normalcy of my life, the things I avoided saying because they didn't fit neatly anywhere. I had spent years perfecting the art of not wanting too much. All the time, I admitted. The honesty startled me. Daniel turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the edge of his expression. His eyes were open now, reflective, searching. Then why don't you? He asked. Because it's safer here. Because wanting more feels dangerous. Because some doors, once opened, don't close the same way again. I don't know, I said instead. Silence returned, thicker than before. I became acutely aware of how close we were, how easily a single decision could change everything. The towel shifted again as he adjusted, and this time I couldn't ignore it. The sight was brief, suggestive rather than explicit, but it sent a jolt through me nonetheless. I stepped back, pretending to reach for more oil, just to give myself space. You okay? He asked. Yeah. I lied. Just adjusting. He hummed in acknowledgement, but I sensed his attention sharpen. The dynamic had shifted. The calm routine we'd relied on was cracking, letting something else seep through. As I resumed, Daniel spoke more quietly, as if sharing a secret. There are things about me you don't know, he said. I almost laughed. I think that's true of everyone. Not like this, he replied. I waited, unsure whether to encourage him or protect myself by staying silent. The rain hit the windows harder, wind rattling the frames. The house groaned softly, like it was reacting to the tension too. I didn't always live alone, he continued. There was someone, a long time ago. The way he said it, someone, felt deliberate. Open-ended. What happened? I asked, before I could stop myself. He hesitated. I could feel it in the way his muscles tensed slightly beneath my hands. I let fear decide for me, he said. And I've been wondering ever since what would have happened if I hadn't. His words echoed uncomfortably close to my own unspoken regrets. I had my own someone, or at least the memory of one, moments I'd dismissed, chances I'd convinced myself weren't worth the risk. The lamp flickered again, longer this time, plunging us briefly into shadow before stabilizing. In that second of darkness, everything felt possible, and terrifying. Daniel shifted, turning his head further toward me. Our eyes met in the mirror across the room, the reflection capturing more than either of us had intended. The look he gave me wasn't demanding. It was questioning. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. You don't have to keep going, he said softly. If this feels like too much. The offer was real. I could hear it in his voice. An exit. A chance to restore the line before it vanished completely. My hands hovered, suspended between movement and retreat. If I stop now, I thought, nothing changes. And yet, the idea filled me with an unexpected sense of loss. I'm fine, I said, though the words felt thin. We're fine. He studied my reflection for a moment longer, then nodded, turning his face back down. The moment passed, but it didn't disappear. It settled, unresolved, like a question waiting for the wrong, or right, answer. As I continued, the storm outside reached its peak. Thunder rolled in the distance, deep and resonant. With each rumble, I felt the tension tighten further, as if the night itself was urging us towards something neither of us was fully prepared to name. And beneath the steady rhythm of my hands, one thought refused to leave me alone. What happens when the line finally breaks, and who will we be when it does? The thunder came closer, no longer distant or decorative, but immediate, felt more than heard. The windows rattled, and for a moment the lamp dimmed again, threatening darkness. My hands slowed without my permission, as if my body sensed what my mind was still trying to deny. Daniel's breathing changed. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle shift, shallower, uneven. I noticed it because I had been paying attention all night, cataloging every small sign, every almost gesture, every pause that felt heavier than it should. You don't have to pretend, he said quietly. The words landed between us like something fragile. I'm not pretending, I replied, too quickly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pushed himself up slightly, resting on his forearms. The towel stayed in place, but the movement itself felt like a line being tested. The table creaked under the change in weight. I can feel it, he said. When your hands hesitate, heat rushed to my face. That's just me being careful. Or conflicted, he countered. I stepped back again, needing distance, needing air. The room felt warmer now, heavier, the eucalyptus scent cloying instead of calming. I wiped my hands on a towel I didn't need, buying time. You asked earlier about lines, I said. Some lines aren't meant to be explored. Some are warnings. Daniel turned enough to look at me directly this time. His expression wasn't amused or seductive. It was earnest, almost vulnerable. And some are invitations, he said. My chest tightened. I hated how much I understood him. How easily his words found the parts of me I'd kept quiet for years. I don't think you realize what you're asking, I said. I think I do, he replied. And I think you do too. Silence stretched between us, taut and humming. Outside, rain slammed against the glass in sheets, blurring the world beyond the room into streaks of gray. It felt like we were sealed off, suspended in a moment that had no past and no future, only now. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw more than the calm exterior he usually wore. There was uncertainty there, hope, fear, the same mix I felt twisting inside my own chest. This can't happen, I whispered, though I wasn't sure what this meant anymore. Daniel nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the truth of it. I know. The agreement should have been a relief. It wasn't. He lay back down, turning his face away from me again. The movement felt like a withdrawal, a retreat, but also a challenge. As if he was saying, I've said my part. Now you decide. I stood there, frozen. Every reason I'd ever used to stay quiet rushed forward: responsibility, reputation, the comfort of predictability. I thought about the version of myself I showed the world, the one that never reached too far, never wanted too openly. And I thought about how tired I was of that version. My hands returned to his shoulders, tentative at first. He didn't move, but I felt the way his muscles tensed, waiting. I focused on the familiar pattern, the learned motions, but nothing felt routine anymore. Every touch felt charged, deliberate. Tell me to stop, I said, my voice barely steady. Daniel didn't answer immediately. The pause stretched so long I thought he might not respond at all. Stop, he said at last, but his voice lacked conviction. It sounded like a question disguised as a command. I froze again. That's not fair. No, he agreed softly. It isn't. Another roll of thunder shook the house, closer than before. The lamp flickered violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I could hear him breathing. He could hear mine. Without sight, every sound became sharper, every sensation magnified. I can't see you, he said quietly. You don't need to, I replied, surprising myself. The words hung there, heavy with implication. I hadn't meant them the way they sounded, or maybe I had. I wasn't sure anymore. The light came back a second later, softer this time, as if exhausted by the effort. The room looked the same, but everything felt altered, as though the darkness had rearranged something inside us. Daniel turned his head again, meeting my eyes directly now. There was no humor left in his expression. No pretense. "This is where things change," he said. I nodded. "Or where they don't. That's the lie we tell ourselves," he replied. "That standing still is neutral." My heart pounded. I was acutely aware of how close I was, how easy it would be to lean in, how impossible it would be to undo whatever followed. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said. "Including you." Daniel studied me, his gaze steady. "And what about you?" The question cut deeper than I expected. I didn't have an answer ready. I'd spent so long prioritizing not causing damage that I'd never stopped to consider the cost to myself. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "Neither do I," he said. "But that's never stopped people before." A sharp crack of thunder punctuated his words, so loud it made me flinch. He noticed. "Hey," he said gently. The gentleness undid me. For a moment, just a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to stop thinking and simply feel. The image was intoxicating, terrifying, beautiful, and then guilt surged in, cold and grounding. "This isn't who I'm supposed to be," I said. Daniel's expression softened, not disappointed but understanding. "Who decided that?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. The question echoed too loudly inside me, colliding with years of careful self-denial. The storm outside began to ease, the rain settling into a steadier rhythm. The violence of the moment passed, leaving behind a charged quiet that felt even more dangerous. Slowly, deliberately, I removed my hands. Daniel didn't protest. He didn't try to stop me. That restraint felt more intimate than any touch. "Okay," he said simply. I stepped back, my legs unsteady. The space between us felt enormous now, stretched by everything we hadn't done and everything we still might. As I gathered my things, the ordinary sounds returned, the ticking clock, the hum of the house, the fading rain. Normalcy tried to reassert itself, but it felt hollow, like a costume put on too late. At the door, I hesitated. "Daniel," I said. Yes. I wanted to say 100 things. Apologies, promises, confessions. Instead, only one question surfaced. "What happens now?" He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I guess," he said quietly, "that depends on whether tonight was the end of something, or the beginning." I left without answering, the door closing softly behind me. But even as I stepped back into the rain, one thought followed me, relentless and unresolved. If I walk away now, will the line still exist, or will it haunt me precisely because I didn't cross it? The rain had thinned to a whisper by the time I reached my car, but I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, listening to the ticking of the cooling hood, the faint patter of water sliding down the windshield. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, eyes too bright, jaw clenched, like I'd just escaped something I couldn't name. Inside the house, a light clicked off. The sound carried farther than it should have, threading itself into my chest. I imagined Daniel standing there in the dim, the room rearranged by absence. The massage table bare, the air still heavy with eucalyptus and words left unfinished. The image settled uncomfortably close, as if I'd left part of myself behind with the lamp's softer glow. "You did the right thing," I told myself. The thought didn't bring relief. The drive home passed in fragments, red lights smearing into lines, the radio murmuring a song I didn't register, my mind replaying moments out of order. His voice, the flicker of the lamp, the way darkness had changed everything without touching anything at all. At home, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, expectant. I kicked off my shoes and stood in the entryway longer than necessary, listening to the building settle, the distant hum of traffic. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I froze. Nothing. Just a notification from an app I didn't care about. Still, my heart took its time slowing down. I showered, letting the water run hotter than usual, as if I could rinse the night off my skin. Steam filled the small bathroom, blurring the mirror. I didn't wipe it clear. I wasn't sure I wanted to see myself too sharply yet. "This changes nothing," I tried again. But the truth pressed back immediately, it had already changed everything. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. Because the question had been asked out loud, and once spoken, it couldn't be unheard. Later, wrapped in a towel, I checked my phone again. No messages. I wasn't sure whether I felt disappointed or relieved. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was shallow, crowded with half-formed dreams, rooms without lights, lines drawn in chalk that washed away in the rain, a voice calling my name from just beyond a door I never quite opened. Morning arrived gray and unremarkable. The storm had passed completely, leaving the city rinsed and ordinary. People went to work. Cars honked. Life resumed its rhythm with an almost insulting ease. At work, I moved through the day on autopilot. I answered questions, smiled when required, completed tasks I'd done 100 times before. On the surface, nothing was wrong. Underneath, a low hum of tension persisted, like a note held just long enough to make you uncomfortable. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was him. Just my name on the screen. No message yet. I stared at it until the display dimmed. You don't have to respond, I thought. You already made your choice. But had I? The phone buzzed once more, then stopped. When I finally unlocked it, there was a single message waiting. Daniel, I keep thinking about last night. I don't know what that means yet. I read it 3 times. The words were careful, neutral, and yet, they carried everything. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. I don't know either, I wrote, then erased it. Minutes passed. The cursor blinked, patient, relentless. Finally, I locked the phone without replying. The rest of the day blurred again, but the message stayed with me, a quiet weight in my pocket. Not a demand, not a plea, just an acknowledgement that whatever we'd stepped up to, and stepped back from, was still there, waiting. That evening, as the sky darkened, my phone buzzed once more. A second message, sent hours after the first. Daniel, we don't have to decide anything yet. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Outside my window, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. The night looked calm, normal, deceptively so. I picked up my phone again, my thumb hovering over the screen. This time, I didn't lock it. I didn't type either. I just stared at his words, feeling the space between us stretch, not empty, but charged. Alive with possibility, with restraint, with everything unresolved. And as the room around me settled into darkness, one thought surfaced, quiet but insistent. If we don't decide, does that mean the moment is over, or that it's still unfolding, somewhere just out of sight? The days that followed were a strange blend of normalcy and tension. I went to Daniel's house a few times, under the pretense of massages, of catching up, of routine, but nothing was routine anymore. The air between us was taut, filled with unsaid words, lingering glances, and gestures that carried more weight than they ever had before. We spoke, of course, in polite sentences. Small talk, questions about work, weather, trivial things meant to anchor us to ordinary life. But under every word was the memory of last night, the moment where lines blurred and boundaries trembled. I could feel him watching me in the spaces between sentences, and I wondered if he could feel me watching him, too. Sometimes, I caught him staring at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Not a look of desire, not exactly, but something more complicated, more searching. It unsettled me, made my pulse spike in ways that were familiar and frightening at the same time. I wanted to reach for it. I wanted to retreat from it. And often, I did both in the same moment. One afternoon, I arrived at his place earlier than usual. He was already sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, sunlight cutting across his face in sharp angles. He smiled faintly when he saw me. That smile should have been comforting. It wasn't. It carried the weight of hesitation, of questions that hadn't been asked, of decisions still dangling in the air. "Hey," he said. His voice was casual, but I could hear the undercurrent. The unspoken. "Hey," I replied, my tone deliberately light. We went through the motions. I offered a shoulder massage, he allowed it. Hands on shoulders, neck, back. But the touch was different now, electric in its restraint, weighted with things neither of us dared name. We laughed sometimes at jokes neither of us really meant. There was a closeness, yes, but it was laced with tension, like a rope pulled taut, ready to snap. At one point, I reached for the towel at his side, only to catch him tensing beneath my fingers. My hand froze. His head turned slightly, catching my gaze, and I saw it: hesitation, curiosity, longing, fear. A storm of feelings neither of us could translate into words. And then the moment passed. He adjusted himself, pulled the towel tighter, and the spell broke. We continued in silence, both pretending, both complicit in the act of avoidance. When I left later that day, the goodbye was brief. No words about what had happened. No promises. Just a nod, a lingering look. And the door clicked shut behind me, leaving me standing in the hallway, drenched in unresolved thoughts. Back home, I stared at my phone again. No messages. Nothing from him. The quiet was louder than it should have been. And yet, somehow, that silence carried a pulse of possibility, a reminder that whatever line had been approached wasn't crossed, but wasn't erased either. I didn't know what would happen next. Whether the tension between us would snap into desire, dissolve into distance, or linger indefinitely like a shadow neither of us could fully escape. All I knew was this: some moments don't end. They wait, and when you least expect it, they return, ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself, and the person standing just across the room. Was it over, or was it only just beginning? The question haunted me as I lay awake, heart pounding, aware that whatever happened next would change everything, or nothing, forever. The rain had been falling all evening, soft at first, then insistent, drumming against the roof with a rhythm that made my chest tighten. The streets outside glistened under the streetlights, reflections blurring with every car that passed. I stood under the small porch, shoes damp, and hesitated before knocking. My hand hovered in the air for a second longer than necessary. Something about tonight felt different, though I couldn't name it. Inside, Daniel's apartment smelled faintly of eucalyptus and candle wax, a combination that usually made me feel calm. He greeted me with a tired smile, one corner of his mouth turning up just enough to make the gesture casual, effortless, but there was a hint of weariness in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "Long day," he said. I nodded, though the truth was heavier than words. My own day had been uneventful, routine, dull, but anticipation and unease twisted inside me in ways I couldn't explain. I followed him into the living room, the familiar space both comforting and strangely charged. The lamp in the corner cast warm light across the room, but the shadows seemed longer tonight, deeper somehow, as if they were reaching into corners I didn't want them to. He gestured toward the massage table in the center of the room. "Ready?" I swallowed and nodded, pretending casualness. I had done this dozens of times before. I knew the rhythm. I knew the boundaries. And yet, standing here, I felt the pull of something unspoken, something beneath the surface, tightening the air between us. Daniel moved toward the bathroom, leaving me alone for a moment. I arranged the oils and towels, my hands shaking slightly despite myself. I told myself it was the weather, the tension of a long day, but my heart wasn't convinced. Every small sound, the drip from the sink, the faint hum of the heater, the distant rumble of thunder, felt amplified, loaded with anticipation. When he returned, wrapped in a towel, the familiar warmth of his presence hit me differently than it had before. He lay down on the table without speaking, face turned away, trusting me in a way that felt fragile, almost vulnerable. My hands hovered for a moment, aware of how close I was, how easily a single decision could change everything. "It's just a massage," I reminded myself. Nothing more. And yet, the way his muscles relaxed under my touch, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the faint hitch in his breath when I applied pressure, it all felt like the first notes of something dangerous, something forbidden. Then, just as I was settling into the familiar rhythm, a soft sound made me pause. A slight shift of the towel. My heart caught. I forced my gaze downward, pretending not to notice, but my mind raced. Why does tonight feel different? The air between us was quiet, yet heavy. Waiting, expecting, and in that silence, a single thought wormed its way into my mind: what happens if the line we've always respected disappears? It was a question I wasn't ready to answer, but I couldn't ignore it either.